10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. The row over Labour Party officials going to America being paid for by the party appears to have got worse today. Kamala Harris now hitting back very hard at Trump. But is all of this a sign that actually Trump is about to win the presidency? Reparations are high on the agenda at the Commonwealth Summit. I wonder just how firm will Keir Starmer and David Lammy be? And we'll talk about the poppy appeal today. I wonder, is the Royal British Legion going woke? And why can't we have the poppy parades all over the country like we used to? But before all of that, let's get the news with Sophia Wensler.
Nigel, thank you. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Rachel Reeves has confirmed she will change the government's fiscal rules in the next week's budget to allow her to increase borrowing for public investment by around £50 billion. Speaking to media today, the Chancellor said her fiscal rules would ensure that debt fell during the first course of this Parliament. Britain's borrowing costs rose today in anticipation of Ms Reeves' decision to rewrite the UK's debt rules. Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, accused the Chancellor of broken promises.
Well, first of all, the Chancellor has been dishonest with the British public. She promised before the election she would not fiddle the borrowing rules. She fought and won the general election with a certain set of plans, and within a matter of weeks she has ripped those up, and worse than that, she's ripped them up in America. She hasn't even had the courtesy of telling the House of Commons. So these are broken promises, huge amounts of extra borrowing that were not disclosed during the general election.
The UK apologising for its role in the slave trade is not on the agenda, according to Number 10, as the row engulfing the Commonwealth Summit continues. Sir Keir Starmer remains clear that we should be facing forward amid mounting pressure from Caribbean nations. However, the Bahamas Foreign Minister says justice is about more than money. They say it's about addressing the lasting impact of slavery. Meanwhile, the King is expected to tell world leaders that unity is their strength, enabling them to tackle the demands of our time when he officially opens a major Commonwealth summit for the first time. Two former Tory councillors in Scotland have defected to Reform UK, giving the party its first elected politicians north of the border. The move comes as leader Nigel Farage issued a call for Tory councillors to quit and join his party. Reform said the decision by Mark Findlater and Laurie Carney, who both sit on the Aberdeenshire Council, demonstrated that the Tory brand is broken across Britain. And GB News can reveal an imminent rise in Channel migrant crossings, with numbers expected to exceed last year's total within just 48 hours. At least 400 migrants are anticipated to have made the journey by the end of today, following 5 boat arrivals this morning, carrying over 250 people to the Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A further 3 small boats were seen heading towards UK waters by lunchtime, taking the number of arrivals so far this year to more than 29,000. The total figure for small boat migrants over the whole of 2023 was 29,437. It comes as reckless people smuggling operations have already resulted in nearly 50 deaths this year. The government's confirmed a ban on disposable vapes starting from June 2025 amid concerns about their impact on children's health. The announcement comes as 5 million single-use vapes are discarded each week, with their use growing over 400% from 2012 to 2023. However, critics claim the move will drive illegal sales, with the Vaping Industry Association warning there'll be a black market surge. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. We begin tonight by talking about the American elections. After all, November the 5th, Election Day, is now not very far away. Now, you might have thought that the complaint about the advert that went out that we discussed yesterday for Labour staffers to go to America, you might have thought that that argument had gone away, but it hasn't, of course, because it turns out that top Labour officials not only went to the Democrat convention, but that it was paid for by the Labour Party. And a couple of photographs appeared of President Biden earlier this year, but still within the election period, with Labour MPs. Is this unnecessary interference? Do the Trump campaign have a point? What does it do to Britain's relations with the USA? We'll talk about that. But far more important than that is, if you look at the polls, if you look at the betting markets, it would appear that over the course of the last couple of weeks, something of a change has happened. Now, I learned today that a French financial markets trader has bet $45 million on Trump to win. So it could be that the markets are not reflecting reality, just the sheer weight of money that's gone on Trump is giving us this impression. I don't know the answer to that any more than you do. But have a look at Kamala Harris today talking about Donald Trump.
It's deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is.
And this followed up by a tweet, and a really very, very strong tweet, in fact, one that some people think actually perhaps was even insightful. Donald Trump is out for unchecked power. He wants a military like Adolf Hitler had, who will be loyal to him, not our Constitution. He is unhinged, unstable, and given a second term, there will be no one to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses. Well, folks, let's be straight about this. Trump also throws back insults. You know, he says that Harris isn't very intelligent, etc. It's an election. It's a rough old game. But I just wonder, is the language and behaviour of Harris invoking Hitler, etc. Now, all right, somebody who worked in Trump's office said that Trump had said that Hitler's guards were loyal to him. But you know what? People coming in late on trains to London often joke that Mussolini ran the trains on time. I wonder, is Trump winning this election? Is that why we got that kind of reaction from Kamala Harris, who, when she first took over the candidacy, appeared to be very relaxed and very laid back? Is Trump winning? Let me know your thoughts, please. Farage at GBNews.com, or tweet using the hashtag Farage on GBNews. I'm joined in the studio by Susie Stride, political commentator. And Susie, you have been out in America campaigning for Kamala Harris.
I have.
So you're now in the dock.
Yeah, I know. Knock me up.
So, now, I mean, the Federal Election Commission rules are actually very, very clear. They're very, very simple, that, you know, you can go to America and give your view and say what you like, just as Americans can come here to do it.
Yeah.
But you can't be paid to do it by a political party, a foreign political party. And you also can't influence decision-making within the parties. Now, that may give Morgan McSweeney a bit of an issue because he ran the Labour campaign. But let's deal with you first. So you were there. Have you been before to America and campaigned?
No, I haven't. I'd love to have, but this is just the first time where it was financially feasible to, obviously, because you pay your own way. You know, I paid my own accommodation, my own flights, and, you know, went into Nevada. It was great. It was great to knock on doors and whatnot. And again, I do think it's important with this. This is something that's always happened, you know, and I personally do think this is a non-story. I think this, you know, I have no idea why it's got this big. And I don't actually think it's good for democracy because we're making a big deal out of, you know, young adults, predominantly young adults in this country, from both parties, because, I mean, you've got Liz Truss, who's not a young adult, but there you go, going over as former Prime Minister.
But she's not being paid by the Conservative Party,
Yeah, but the thing is I wasn't paid by the Labour Party. You know, I just popped over there.
Susie, I accept, right, that you went of your own volition, you did it, you went to Nevada, the weather was great, you thoroughly enjoyed it.
Bit too hot.
And there's a big buzz around an American presidential campaign. The problem Labour have got is twofold. One is McSweeney, when he went over to America, it was said in the press he was going to explain to the Democrats Labour's targeting strategy. Now, that would be a problem.
I mean, again, I'm sorry, but I don't think that is a problem. I mean, why is it?
It is with
I think it's a
American rules.
problem basically because it's the Labour Party. Because look, John Major sent his lot over there, and it did cause some problems.
It did.
But ultimately, that did happen. And I mean, I wasn't around them. I was a kid, so I can't remember. But I bet the media were not going mad about that. And I don't think the point is. This has always happened. There is nothing unusual about it. I actually would say, and I would challenge and say, it is good for democracy that we learn from each other.
But you paid your own way. The Sophia Patel advert to Labour staff didn't say anywhere that they wouldn't be on full pay, didn't say anywhere they need to buy their own aeroplane tickets, and say they'd have free accommodation. I mean, they're the words there.
But you know what I can say to you?
That is problematic.
But no, the reason why that's not problematic is this. I have been a Labour Party member and activist for 20 years, OK? The reason why I have never gone out, and I would love to have gone out, especially for Obama, is because I'd have to have paid my own way. Because there wasn't free options to go.
Why didn't she say so?
Well, because she's got a few words to say it, very punchy, in a social media. I feel so sorry for her, because I think she's fantastic. I just think that this is what's happened. It is absolutely normal, in the same way that Republicans came over here and campaigned for the Conservative Party, in the same way that Tories go over there and campaign, in the same way that you've gone over there and campaigned. And I think by making this a big deal, I think we literally make our politics poorer. We make our cultural experience poorer, because we are going to put off people in the future feeling like they can go over.
No.
I bet you any money that those paid their own way.
All right, at best, that was incredibly badly worded, right? At best.
At best, you probably didn't realise that the right-wing press were going to jump all over it and make a big story out of something that's not a story, and there's far more bigger stories going on.
Well, if you've broken American
far more bigger stories going on.
Well, the really big story is that America's our most important ally in the world.
Well, the big story is Donald Trump, let's be honest, is a bit like a spoilt brat. Let's be honest.
Well,
let's be honest. I look at this. I fear for my child sometimes. He's just sitting out there watching me, and I think, I really hope Donald Trump doesn't win, because this behaviour, making such a big deal out of this. I've just been in America. Let me tell you, I saw shocking levels of homelessness in San Francisco. Yes, it's a Democratic state.
All in Democrat-run states.
Yes,
all of it in Democrat-run states.
Look, I mean, and there is a challenge there for the Democrats on there. But the fact is, what's such a non-story that we're talking about this? We've got far greater things to be talking about, far greater things that actually are news people should be talking about.
Who's the leader of the Western world matters, right? Whether we get a Democrat president or Republican president really matters.
It does matter.
In the light of the Middle East, Ukraine, what could happen in Taiwan, etc. It matters hugely. I suggest to you that the video I showed earlier, the tweet I showed earlier, Harris is now on the back foot and just lashing out.
I mean, look, I don't know, but the fact is if Donald Trump did say that, I mean, it's quite a concerning thing to say. And I think that this is the thing, it's really interesting. When I spent time in America, I met Republicans who were like, we are not voting for Donald Trump, because there's this huge, I mean, honestly, you cannot over-exaggerate the amount of concern that people have about the way that he is. And I'll be honest with you, it's like, would you want him to be the head teacher of your kid's school? Do you know what I mean? Would I leave my kid alone with him in a room? No, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't.
Do you know what?
He may be a force of nature.
He
may be a force of nature, but the unpredictability.
No wars, increased wealth. It was a very successful 4 years.
No, I just think,
you might not like
so happened.
You might not like it.
It's not about that. For me, it is even these things about, saying to England what they're going to do about trade, and they may make it really difficult. Like, I mean, that's just not a good way to be a global world power, is it? You want to work with other democracies.
Do you think he's going to win?
I pray, because I am a prayer.
No. What do you think?
I don't think he's going to win, but I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't think he was going to win before, and I still remember that moment. I also didn't think Brexit was going to happen. So, for me, look, we can only hope and pray that he doesn't, because I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think it's good for NATO. And I think, Nigel, you can agree with me.
He's the best thing for NATO ever. He made all the other countries increase their contributions. The Secretary-General of NATO thought he was a great thing for NATO.
And for Ukraine, pulling out of that war. Is that positive?
Do you think he will?
Is that good? Well, I don't know. But I just think that is not good. You cannot have someone like Putin winning.
He might want him to try and negotiate a peace. And there may be a price to that peace, but equally there's a price to the continued war.
I just don't like bullies, and I think he comes across as a bully.
Well, Susie Stride there doesn't like Donald Trump's personality, doesn't like his outlandish nature, and she's not alone in that, and I fully understand that. But I tell you what, folks, believe me, he is going to win on November the 5th. I'm absolutely putting my head over the parapet on this. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, because it seems to me that Keir Starmer is walking into something of a trap. This reparations row, which appears to have come virtually out of nowhere, I believe is being stirred up with the Chinese Communist Party, who'd love to break the Commonwealth apart. The question is, can Starmer be firm enough to stop this debate from totally poisoning the Commonwealth? All of that in just a moment.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons, obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Now, I asked you, the viewers at home, for some reactions to the question, is Trump winning this election? And, of course, anything to do with Trump provokes extraordinary passion. Most of the comments we get back we couldn't possibly read out on live television, but we'll have a few here. Chris says, for God's sake, I hope he's not winning. We will all go to hell in a handcart. Steve feels very differently. He says, I flipping hope so. We need someone in power who cares about Britain more than Starmer and Lammy do. And I'll take one more. Miriam says, I wish I could go to America and campaign for Trump. There were no wars under Trump. Other world leaders had respect for him. Harris endorsed all the dreadful things that Biden has overseen during his administration. Well, folks, one thing was certain, we haven't got very long to wait. Now, the heads of Commonwealth summits, which happen every couple of years, there's been controversy in the past. Back in the 1980s, there was a really major standoff over South Africa and apartheid. But frankly, ever since then, the Commonwealth has been pretty harmonious. We got, I thought, just a hint what might be going wrong with Barbados a couple of years ago, where having lent the Barbadians vast amounts of money, that's the Chinese, suddenly the Queen was removed as head of state without even a referendum. Well, now, I've got to tell you, Keir Starmer has walked into an absolute hornet's nest. And much of it stirred up by our friends at the United Nations. A judge at the International Court of Justice suggesting we should pay £18 trillion worth of, I mean, that would be 6 years of our entire national wealth as reparations. I laugh, but actually, Starmer is facing quite a serious day. I'm joined by the President of the Commonwealth Union, Nerj Diva, former, of course, MP and MEP colleague of mine, not the same party, but we sort of got on quite well, Nerj, I think. And Susie is still here with me. Nerj, just quickly tell us about the Commonwealth Union.
Well, the Commonwealth Union is the first global cyber community NGO. It's no point having heads of state meeting in some remote island and saying it's the Commonwealth. That doesn't work. The Commonwealth is a family of people, the largest grouping of people in the world, 2.5 billion people, who can, by and large, speak the same language, which no other organization, not the UN, not BRICS, not G, whatever, can do. So we speak the same common language, have the same legal basis that creates all the laws and run the countries of the Commonwealth, 56 now. It has the same parliamentary democracy system. You can talk about her skin may till you're blue in the face in Zambia, they'll understand it. And it has.
And you care about it a lot.
And I do care about it. And Susie is wearing a red poppy. Yep. Now, what is that red poppy? Do you know that 700,000 Indian soldiers suffered casualties in 2 world wars voluntarily? They were not forced to do it, to protect England.
Nerj, you're absolutely right, and I think because of its history, its geography, its commonality, I've always thought it could be a very important... But Starmer is facing a real problem here. These demands for reparations, they're extortionate. But it's ridiculous. But it seems to be worryingly... it seems there's a real passion now with the Bahamas, with Barbados...
OK, let's go back to history, because this is a history lesson. Mr Starmer, bless his cotton socks, if he does wear them, has got it wrong. He shot from the hip. What he needs to do is to engage with these people, because we are a family. If you have a family quarrel, you don't do megaphone diplomacy and make statements in the House, which actually then shut down any communication, which he seems to have done today. Second thing is that every problem that the Commonwealth had has been sorted out quietly as a family. Margaret Thatcher, she sorted out South Africa. And
that was a difficult period.
Very difficult with apartheid. Yeah. But it's all done. South Africa didn't have a war. Nobody died. Apartheid left, went, and the blacks have got equal and more rights, and they're OK. So who did that? Because of the Commonwealth. Nobody else, not the UN. It was Margaret Thatcher and the Commonwealth working together in Lusaka that made this happen. That's the sort of leadership we need in this country now. And we need people who understand our history. That brings me and Susie here together to admire the poppy.
No, the problem is there is this debate that somehow the Brits are uniquely awful in the slave trade. It's something that's permeated the conversation here in our schools.
It's all balderdash. It is the British who abolished slavery in 1834. Slavery still goes on, Nigel.
Today. Yeah.
Today, I have had evidence in the European Parliament. I had inquiries as to slavery going on all around certain parts of the world, which we don't want to go into now and start another row. Yeah. and that has not stopped. But it was the British who, Wilberforce and Fox and all these people, who worked so hard to get it stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we must remember that. The next thing is, OK, yes, slavery was absolutely terrible. But if you go back to Barbados or Bahamas or wherever my friends in the Commonwealth are complaining about, the assets left behind, the tea plantations, the cotton plantations, tobacco plantations. I did a little quick valuation and I got someone to do it. Do you know that the Barbados land value for the plantations is $5 billion today?
Because of what they produce?
Yeah. So of course, the slaves should have been paid, and they should have been normal workers, but they weren't. And that is a part of half the problem. But do you also realise that 70% of the land in the Bahamas, for example, or in Barbados, is owned by the government? If you really actually care about the people whose land you're talking about is to give reparation, first, please, do a bit of privatisation or give it to people as we did the council houses. Margaret gave it to the council house owners.
Well, we're not going to rehearse all the 80s arguments with Thatcher, I can promise you, although I know you were a great fan. So, Nerj, we've had the Archbishop of Canterbury appeasing demands for reparations. What should the Prime Minister do?
The Prime Minister should keep quiet and engage the other Commonwealth leaders, the other 55, or maybe a much smaller number, really. A lot of people are not bothered about this. A lot of the smaller Caribbean countries and perhaps some of the African countries, some of who were actually part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because their chiefs sold their people to the slavers.
Oh, you can't say things like that.
No.
It just happens to be true. Seriously, on this point, this is tough for Starmer, very, very tough. It's almost like an ambush. The difficulty is David Lammy, who, again and again and again has talked about the sins of the past, has used the word reparations himself. And you've got, a dozen or more Labour backbenchers now in the Commons talking about the fact we should be paying reparations. Is Starmer, in your view, as a Labour supporter, is he tough enough to deal with this?
Look, I think Keir Starmer's already made it very clear, what he's going to do on this, and Rachel Reeves has also reiterated that, and it's exactly what you're saying as well. That we've got to focus on the problems of today. You've got modern day slavery. There are modern day problems, and actually the children of now in those countries will not forgive the leaders of now if they're bringing up that which happened 200 years ago, because there are modern day problems now that we need to be facing. And I think it's fascinating because, Wilberforce did what he did 200 years ago. And the fact is are the Wilberforces of now, our parliamentarians, whether it's Keir Starmer, Rachel, the point is it is incumbent upon them to stand up to what is evil now. And modern day slavery is a massive part of that. And if I'm honest with you, you can understand where people are coming from. You can understand the pain and the suffering and that which was wrong and evil. But the fact is you can't now, in some ways, go round in circles about that. You've got to face the problems that we face today.
We can't
and I think you're absolutely right. That needs to be things like, what are we doing about modern day slavery? What are we doing about sex trafficking? What are we doing about these things?
400 people cross the English Channel today. And I'll bet you some of those today, another 400 today, and I'll bet you some of those finish up in the modern day equivalent in this country of slavery. Nerj, thank you for coming in and sharing your passion about the Commonwealth. It's one that I share, I have to say. I just hope that Starmer understands that if he gives an inch, if he gives a moment's weakness on this, then the aggressors will try and take a mile.
Might I say something?
Go on.
After Brexit, we have to go back to working with the Commonwealth. Have we made the Commonwealth a priority?
No. And that was, I'm afraid we've wasted years.
Hitting above our weight.
We've wasted years, and I'm sad about it. Now, the poppy came up a moment ago. Nerj talked about it. It's been the Royal British Legion's poppy launch today. But it also, we've also seen in big online sites, very well-paid jobs for diversity and inclusion officers. But perhaps even more worrying is that Remembrance Day parades all over the country have been cancelled this year and in the last couple of years because the Royal British Legion cannot get affordable insurance. What the hell is going on? We'll dig into that in just a moment.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. We've seen cloud progressively build in the west all day, and that cloud will bring heavy rain overnight. In the east, it's drier, but even here, increasingly cloudy as an area of low pressure moves into Ireland, bringing a slow-moving weather front, hence the advancing cloud through the day. But that cloud will be thick enough to bring showery rain into the southwest and then Wales through the evening, as well as Northern Ireland after around midnight. Some heavy bursts and some wet weather expected in places overnight, but drier to the east, even if it is increasingly gloomy by dawn. A lot of low cloud around, some mist and hill fog. A few cloud breaks are possible, but on the whole, It's generally a grey start to the day, a mild start because we've still got this southerly wind direction, so by 7 a.m, 14 or 15 Celsius. However, for southwest England, for parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, we've got those outbreaks of heavier rain. Some showers pushing into the northwest of England and western Scotland. Drier to the east, but a lot of cloud. Just a few breaks possible there for the northeast of Scotland. Otherwise, for many, well, it is a overcast start to Friday morning and doesn't brighten up much through the morning either, except for the southwest, where we do get some breaks in the cloud returning by the afternoon, albeit with an increasing breeze and some showers. Meanwhile, cloud and rain slowly moves into the Midlands and the southeast. Some heavy bursts, but generally it fizzles out. It's another mild day, but it's not quite as mild as Thursday. By the start of Saturday, the cloudier and wetter weather is confined to the northwest of Scotland. Still some showery rain in the southeast, but otherwise it's a clear start to the day. A few fog patches, they lift into sunny spells. Sunday's also mostly fine for much of the country with some decent spells of sunshine, but for northwestern Scotland there'll be some heavy rain.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight
and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, I've always been a huge fan of the Poppy Appeal. Poppy Appeal, I love its history, the original poem where the inspiration came from. I personally don't wear a poppy until the 1st of November. Doesn't mean I don't put my money in the pot, I promise you. But the Legion has a couple of problems. One, there is a slightly sort of growing row about diversity and inclusion, and people saying, is the RBL going woke? But the other is the lack of parades due to insurance problems, and I find that very, very worrying. I'm joined down the line by Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory, CEO of SAFA, the Armed Forces Charity. Andrew, good evening. Welcome to the programme. The Poppy Appeal, I mean, it's been a big part, hasn't it, of our hearts and our conscience going all the way back to 1921.
Nigel, good evening. Absolutely. And I think it's such an important time of year where, as a veteran myself, whereas Chief Executive of SAFA, the Armed Forces Charity, all the charities work together to support those who are serving, have served, and their families. And this is the time of year where the nation also remembers those who have served, who have sacrificed to ensure our freedoms, our democracy, our liberties are protected. So I too, Nigel, not surprisingly, I'm a massive fan of it. And I think it's fantastic that people are proud today to wear the poppy.
Yes, I agree with you. And it's been quite interesting, actually, that it's been said over the last couple of years that in some parts of the country, attendances on Remembrance Sunday have actually been going up. They've gone down in some cities, but they've been going up across the country. But, you know, in Essex, just one example, in Essex, 5 years ago, there were 77 parades. And, you know, that's the local scouts and cadets or whatever, and they parade through a high street and go to the local war memorial where, you know, various representatives of civil society lay wreaths and there's a 2-minute silence. This year in Essex, there'll be only 9 parades. And that's reflected right across the country because there's somehow some problem with the British Legion or local councils getting insurance. And I just wonder, Andrew, I look at that, I look at this big advert we saw today, hiring a head of diversity and inclusion for the Legion. I just wonder whether the Legion has sort of slightly lost its way.
No, I'm not in the Legion. I work, I'm chief executive of a sister partner charity, but I absolutely don't think the Legion has lost its way, quite the opposite. So there's two separate issues you've raised there, Nigel, and I'll address them both. Firstly, the most important thing is that people wear the poppy and show their support for the armed forces community. That is fantastic. Parades are a wonderful manifestation of that support for the armed forces community. I can't comment specifically on what the issues are about getting insurance and things like that. It is obviously a pity if there are less parades. I completely agree with you. But nevertheless, people's support, people putting their money in the Royal British Legion, collectors' tins and things like that is what really matters, because that shows the nation's support. So I just don't have enough knowledge to answer your question about parades.
Yeah.
On the second issue you raise, it is very interesting that what all charities are seeing is more diversity in the people we are supporting. That is a really good thing. I'll give you one example. I, as well as being chief executive of SAFA, the Armed Forces charity, have the honour to be the patron of Fighting with Pride, a relatively new charity there to support LGBT veterans, particularly those who were dismissed before the ban on being lesbian or gay in the armed forces was removed on the 12th of January 2000. So making sure we can support this diverse community is absolutely fundamental. How the British Legion do it is their business. They have a membership of over 200,000 in 2,000 branches. That is a huge challenge. It's not for me to say whether it is right or wrong that they employ somebody to address inclusivity and diversity, but all of us should embrace this. We're doing it in SAFA. How the Legion do it is their business.
All right. Sir Andrew, thank you very much for joining us this evening and giving us those very strong, passionate responses. Susie, what does Remembrance Day mean? I mean, you're wearing your poppy already. You obviously believe in this.
Oh, I'm massive. I mean, just also listening to that gentleman.
He was good, wasn't he?
Oh,
really
yeah,
good.
listening to him speak. I mean, look, my granddad served in World War II.
Yep.
My great-granddad served in the trenches.
Yep.
My dad, from when we were kids, would take us over to the trenches. And I'm so grateful because he educated us in this thing of, people gave their lives. You know, and it's one of, I mean, I work with young people, not as much now, but for 20 years I worked in schools. And it is a concerning thing that there isn't this, not with all young people, but with some, there isn't this understanding. Actually, people gave their lives. There was great sacrifice.
I guess as the generations go on, the sort of the direct link becomes a little bit more remote, doesn't it?
Yes, but it's all about education, isn't it? It's all about education. I think, some of the things we teach in schools are not as necessary, and this is something that I think, where you come from, your heritage is very important, and the fact that someone in your family line, the fact that it could have gone another way, the fact that people, paid a great sacrifice from all walks of life to fight against a great evil, and it is very important, and I find those memorial services very, very powerful. Like, my mum leads a church, and we always have one, and I think it's very, very important. And I don't know why this is happening with the parades. I think that sounds, it does sound concerning. But, I mean, for me personally, and I think to lots of people, this is something that we do hold dear. And, it is very important that we fight for those parades, but also we fight to make sure that younger generations are taught about it and are educated about it. Because I also think it gives, we talk about mental health and mental health crisis. I actually think it helps people's mental health crisis, mental health to have that perspective.
That's interesting, is that you and I don't agree on very much, but on this I'm completely with you. I think it really is important.
My grandma used to talk about ducking under the table, and she's got this little bag of sweets, and all she can think about the sweets rather than the planes going over.
I think it is actually very uniting. It should be apolitical. I did listen carefully to what Andrew said about diversity. I just, provided it doesn't divide veterans up into different groups and helps to bring them together, that I think is the really, really important thing. Now, one little point here, folks. I've warned you in the past about smart meters, and I know whenever I do this, some people scream that I'm wrong. But I tell you what, we've actually got companies now saying, if you've got a traditional electricity meter, they may be past their sell-by date, as if it's like supermarket food. They're doing everything they can to get you onto a smart meter. And whether it's a smart meter for electricity Whether it's a smart meter for water, it's all, and they admit this, about demand management, namely that if demand for electricity starts to get near exceeding supply, they might just cut you off. So my advice is don't listen to them, don't be bullied, don't get a smart meter, even if they tell you everything will be cheaper. I don't believe them. I'm going to say a huge thank you, Susie, for coming in, joining us on the programme. After this, we are going to go back and debate with a couple of very passionate advocates on either side of the argument, a report out on net zero that estimates the policy will cost each household £300,000 between now and 2050. All of that in a couple of minutes.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And for the next nearly 400 years, had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, when it comes to net zero, there are claims and there are counterclaims. And I've got to tell you, there is a huge amount of passion on both sides of this argument. And sometimes actually getting through to the truth is not easy. But a report out today by Net Zero Watch suggests that net zero government policy could cost each household up to £300,000 between now and 2050. And the Independent Climate Change Committee in 2019 estimated that net zero would cost the economy $50 billion a year by the late 2020s. And the National Grid, well, estimates are that to upgrade the grid, and this is to build, pylons, lines in from the North Sea wind farms, etc., to actually upgrade the grid properly could cost an eye-watering $3 trillion. I tell you all that I do know, and it seems to me that the more reliance we have on renewable energy, the more expensive our bills. Because we claim to have the highest percentage of our electricity generated by renewables, more than any other neighbouring country, and yet we've got the most expensive electricity prices in the world. Now, friend of this programme, and very much a passionate, now Donohoe McCarthy, passionate really with your climate media coalition and all the things that you do. And I know you're a huge advocate for all of this. But just before we get to the report, just my basic question. The more wind turbines we see, the more solar farms we see, the higher our bills are.
No, that was true 10 years ago, Nigel, when they required subsidies.
Yeah, a lot of subsidies.
Yeah, they did in 10, 15 years ago. And what actually the role of government is to fund the beginning when they're expensive. And what it has done, the subsidies went 5 years ago for new fossil fuel, for new renewable energy. So new wind turbines, new solar panels are cheaper than the current price of fossil fuels, and so therefore they are beginning to reduce. So the cost on people's bills is going down now than from what it was 5 years ago.
I'm going to repeat the point. The more wind turbines I see, the more solar farms we see, we still have the most expensive electricity in the world. Why?
No, the point you made was that the more wind farms we have, the more solar farms, the higher prices are going. Actually, that was true 10 years ago. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But for the last 5 years, it's the opposite, because what has happened is that the price of renewables has crashed. When I put solar panels into my house in '98, it was £10,000 for 1 kilowatt. It is now less than £1,000, a tenth of the price.
Well, I wonder
and the International Energy Agency says globally, in almost every single market in the world, renewables are now the cheapest.
So do you disagree with this report?
I think it's a hilarious report. It's not based on anything reasonable. For example, he says £58,000 cost is going to cost every householder £58,000 to switch to EVs. The Automobile Association says already the combined running cost and capital cost of buying an EV is less than a new fossil fuel car, and they're getting cheaper every year. So even on that
well, I mean, buying an EV is still 10 grand more expensive. I'm going to get a counter view.
Yes, agrees with you.
I'm going to get a counter view. I'm joined by Lord Craig McKinley, who was chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group in the House of Commons. Craig, I don't know whether you heard Donohoe there. It seems to me we have very expensive electricity and energy in this country. What do you make of this report put out by Net Zero Watch today?
Well, I did the forward for it, so yes, I do agree with what's in it. It is very obvious, isn't it, that renewable energy has not made prices go down. It's going to be actually worse, because at the moment, we don't have that much of it. So what is produced tends to be used. When you become more and more reliant on it, you then have to store it for those days when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. There's that superb German word, which I'm sure you've heard before, Nigel, Dunkelflaute. It's a situation where you've got an anticyclone across the whole of Europe, where middle of winter, very cold, high energy demand, but there are very few windmills going around and obviously very little sun power. Then you have to bulk up your renewables and then store that excess energy to get you through those lull periods. Now, none of those costs to date have been considered at all. Now, I will agree with Donegal that if you have the most perfect day of perfect sunshine and your wind turbine is going around in a beautiful breeze of 20 knots, it might just be cheaper. But when you add in the requirement to store that energy for the Dunkelflaute times or the night time or anything else, then you've got a significant problem.
OK.
Now, it was only just last week.
Craig, bear with me. I want to put those points, if I may, to Donohoe. So the point is, Donohoe, and Craig makes the point very strongly, that we do get big anticyclones in February over the North Sea, when barely a single wind turbine would work, when solar wouldn't work, and this is an intermittent form of energy, and we can't store it effectively.
The Global Warming Policy Foundation have been sounding the alarm for 20, 30 years, and it's never been true. 30 years ago, 80% of our electricity came from coal. It's now zero. Has there been any blackouts? No. And actually,
we've been very close quite recently. Very close.
Interestingly, over the National Grid said this year, despite the fact we closed our last coal plant, our cushion is even larger than it's been for 4 or 5 years. And the actual point that they make is that's going to be a net cost. The problem with the Global Warming Policy Foundation is they always count the costs. But that is economically illiterate, because as you know, Nigel, you have to cost the benefits. And the Oxford University's peer-reviewed research shows that by 2050 we'll be making a net benefit by getting to net zero of $12 trillion globally. Now, that's peer-reviewed. Now, this paper by Andrew Mountford is not peer-reviewed and basically has no evidence base for it.
Craig, I'm going to bring you back in on that.
Nigel, I would say it was peer-reviewed. It was reviewed by me. But no, the reality is we're not seeing any of these so-called benefits coming through. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, just last week we came very, very close to a problem with the interconnector with Norway nearly tripped out. And we would have then had a problem. And that is before we're starting to demand that people have heat pumps, very electricity hungry during the winter, and more EVs, very, very electricity hungry for obvious reasons. So we need to bulk up an electricity supply as we reduce fossil fuels. Now, we're not even close to that. And Donegal says about the benefits. Well, I don't see too many benefits about having pylons going across the country, despoiling parts of Norfolk and elsewhere. And I don't see too many benefits in digging up vast tracts of Africa with a diesel digger as we produce more and more aluminium, copper and everything else. And I really don't see very much benefit to the country in closing down our final blast furnaces for making steel and then offshoring that to India and China and sticking all that production back on a diesel ship back to the UK. I'd love to have Donegal's opinion of the Drax power station.
Oh, Drax. Drax is awful. Craig makes some very strong points there. Some very strong points. Drax, a monstrosity?
Yeah, great.
Good. I thought you would. I mean,
it's using tax. Just because something reduces carbon doesn't mean.
But what about steel? Craig's point is that in the name of net zero, and with very expensive energy, we have almost deindustrialised on an unimaginable level. We now see that steel that was being made in South Wales, it's going to be made in India. I mean, this makes no sense.
No, there's actually a lot of nonsense talked about this steel, what happened on the steel front. At the moment, Britain exports something like 8 million tonnes of recyclable steel to Turkey, and it reprocesses it dirtily. And then we import back new steel. It's mad. So what will happen with the new green arcs, the arc furnaces? Well, we will process that recycled steel in the UK.
But it's not primary steel.
No, it's not primary steel.
It's secondary.
But the vast majority of our steel consumption is not primary.
But primary is still important strategically.
So what we will do is potentially we will be supplying almost the majority, the vast majority of our steel will now be produced in Britain rather than being imported from Turkey.
Our largest refinery is now set to close because it's too damned expensive to refine in Britain. We're deindustrialising, Donna.
So we have industrialised for 30 years, and not for the reason that, not just because we are changing our energy system. We've industrialised because, let's face it, manufacturing is cheaper in other countries because the cost of labour is cheaper in China.
Well, cost of energy matters
too. Cost of labour. And actually, you're talking about the economic...
Craig, are you still there?
Just one point I think Craig hasn't made. I think it's really important. It's about jobs.
Yeah.
The green economy, according to the OBR, says we have 640,000 green jobs already in the UK. The oil industry only provides 30,000.
Right. I'm going to stop you there. Craig, 30 seconds to the end of the show. Donoghue says the green economy will give us more jobs.
Absolutely.
Well, for a start, we're not producing any of these wind turbines much in the UK at all. None of them made in Scotland. Most of the actual pylons and and the steel and everything else is made in Vietnam and shipped here. Not too many jobs there. We talked about steel. We will be the only G20 nation incapable of making virgin steel. Countries do this for a reason, because it's a strategic industry that is necessary.
I agree. I'm going to draw stumps. I'm going to draw stumps on both of you. I tell you what, this debate's barely begun, I promise you. But thank you to both of you for joining me. And thank you to all of you at home for being with me this week. I'm back with you on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. But of course, in any moment now, you are going to get Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg and State of the Nation. Jacob, what will you be discussing?
Well, I'm going to be talking primarily about reparations and this idiotic idea that we should give money to countries that had slavery in it when it's the British Empire that stopped slavery. But because people can't get enough of you, I'm going to be talking about you a bit later. And the email you've sent to Tory however, so it's going to be a smorgasbord of interest for viewers.
Back on reparations, do you think Starmer's going to stand firm?
Well, when did he ever stand firm?
We're going to have to, because if you give an inch on this...
They will take an L, but... The 2019 manifesto was all for reparations, and he stood on that. He wanted to get
and they know it.
Corbyn elected,
and they know it.
And they've pointed it out.
They know it, and they see weakness. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. I'm done. Over and out from me. First, though, let's get the all-important weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. We've seen cloud progressively build in the west all day, and that cloud will bring heavy rain overnight. In the east, it's drier, but even here, increasingly cloudy as an area of low pressure moves into Ireland, bringing a slow-moving weather front, hence the advancing cloud through the day. But that cloud